What's up, everybody? Nick Whalen, Alex Barutha here with you. It's the Monday edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball Podcast. A lot to get to, Alex. So we got our first half week of games post All-Star break. We got a huge Lakers Mavericks, showdown tomorrow night. We will talk about Lakers Nuggets from the weekend. But first, Alex, I want to start here. There are two teams that I feel like we need to discuss, and we need to do this as quickly as we can. The Phoenix Suns and the Philadelphia 76ers. Are we ready to be done? Are we washing our hands of these teams?
The 76ers, I think so, given the news that, basically, I think what we already knew, which is that Joel Embiid is not healthy and might need surgery, and just what the treatment plan has been isn't working. And for Phoenix, unfortunately, I feel like we can't rule them out because of Victor Wembanyama being out for the year and the fact that Sacramento is treading water, can't play defense anymore without De'Aaron Fox. So I don't think we can write them off, unfortunately.
I'm ready to just be done with the Sixers. I will say that. I'm with you there. I think, realistically at this point, like, what is the best case scenario for the rest of this season? It's that I guess doctors and the specialists that Joel Embiid is meeting with, they clear him and say, well, it's not that bad. You could keep pushing. And they make the play-in and just get rocked by the Cavs or the Celtics, right? Like, I don't see a scenario in which the Sixers are doing anything of consequence in the playoffs. And I don't think just making the playoffs at this point really matters. Like, I think everybody realizes what a train wreck this has been. The goal was not just, oh, let's see if we can get in and maybe we can upset the Celtics. Like, no, this is not where they were supposed to be. It's also difficult for me to accept the reality of the other side of this, which is, okay, you shut down Embiid and you say, all right, we're playing for next year. Paul George will be healthier. Embiid will be healthier. I'm not confident that anything's going to change with Embiid. Like, he turns 31 in a couple of weeks. Like, is this magically going to reverse as he moves into his mid-30s? I think his best days are behind him, right? I don't really think there's even much of a debate here.
Best days are definitely behind him. I think it's only going to get worse from here. I mean, he'll have his days or his weeks where he feels good and he'll be all right, but those are going to be fewer and farther in between. And like you said, yeah, this team is only getting older. I mean, Embiid, another surgery is going to help him in theory, but there's only so many surgeries you can have on the same knee before it actually just starts to get worse, right?
Yeah. Yeah, Sixers are up to plus 550 at DraftKings to make the playoffs at this point. So I don't know what is that implied probability of, like 18%, something like that. Not good. But at the same time, it's like, all right, which of these teams are going to make it? Like, are the Bulls going to be a playoff team? Are the Nets going to be a play-in team? I don't know. I am with you though on the Suns as far as, like, I want to write this team off so bad. The vibes are terrible. They look like they're having no fun. These pieces don't fit whatsoever. I think they, in a perfect world, would have shaken things up at the trade deadline. Obviously couldn't do that because of Beal, but we cannot cross them out despite losing 8 of their last 10 because of the math in the Western Conference. Like, they're only a game and a half back of Sacramento. It's like, if the Kings have an injury or the Warriors or the Mavericks can't get healthy, it's like there are still spots available for Phoenix. I think you would like to think maybe they've already had their worst stretch. Maybe they're better down the stretch. I don't know, but it's still a team that has a really difficult schedule the rest of the way as well. It's like there are almost no cupcakes left on their schedule. And I mean, they lose by what, 22 to the Toronto Raptors the other night?
Yeah, the only stat I can really point to with Phoenix is that they are 25-19 when Kevin Durant plays. So when he doesn't play, they lose. And so, there was a stretch earlier in the year, really that bad stretch that they went on from like early November through early December, where he missed a chunk of games. And I think they won one of those that he was out.
Yep.
So if Durant can stay healthy down the stretch, I think the numbers would actually say they could probably pass Sacramento, and that wouldn't be surprising.
Yeah. All right, let's talk some fantasy here, Alex. We'll do a little waiver wire recap. I was pretty quiet in the stake league. I also lost like 7 spots in the standings over the last 3 days because everybody is injured. So hopefully we can make that ground back up. But I made my additions last week, and we'll get those guys in the lineup this week. But in terms of notable ad drops, this is a 16-team, very competitive league in-house at RotoWire. Rob Williams was added. Cason Wallace was dropped. Chris Dunn was picked up. Torian Prince was picked up. Julian Strawther. And you made a huge move, Alex, grabbing Moses Moody and parting ways with Cam Whitmore.
Yeah, the Cam Whitmore, it was, I don't even want to say it was fun while it lasted because I didn't even really get that many good games out of him. And I think I only started him 1 week, that week where Houston played 5 times.
Yep.
So completely fine dropping him. And I thought about picking up Chris Dunn. I really debated, do I drop TJ McConnell for Chris Dunn? And I was like, I don't know, because the three categories I need are field goal percentage, steals, and blocks. And the reality is McConnell is like 53% from the field,
Yep.
decent steals guy. Upside is still higher if Halliburton were to get hurt. As far as Moody goes, again, I need a forward, and Moody's pretty good defensively. I don't know what's going to happen when Kuminga comes back, but Moody's played really well for like a month.
Yeah.
Gets basically either a steal or a block every game, almost every game, shoots pretty efficiently, qualifies at both guard and forward on ESPN. So I felt like that was just a pretty easy move for me to make.
Yeah, I like that one. I think the Kuminga question is fair. How does that look when Kuminga is back in the mix? But nevertheless, I think somebody you got to grab right now, especially in a deeper league. Somebody I did want to grab, and I didn't pay up enough because he ended up going for, I think, $13 in this league, was Keldon Johnson of the San Antonio Spurs. Still coming off the bench, but these 3 games since we got the Wembanyama news, 20.3 points, 3.3 rebounds, 3.3 assists, 77% from the field, still giving you a couple threes as well. I mean, the defensive stats are basically non-existent, but really points and field goal percentage for a guy like, they don't really have another center. I guess maybe Charles Bassey. We talked last week about some of the pretty underwhelming options behind Victor Wembanyama, but I think they're going to try to patchwork this kind of similar to what the Lakers are doing in some ways, of like, all right, we have these guys who are maybe technically more of like a 3/4, but we'll go a little bit small. We'll use Keldon Johnson. We'll use Jeremy Sohan in that role.
Yeah, I thought about Keldon Johnson, but part of the issue, like you said, he's shooting 77% these past 3 games. So it's like when he starts shooting 40 or 45%, we're going to go back to like 13 points, 3 rebounds, 3 assists. And then it's like, all right. And that's kind of actually how I don't feel this exact way about Max Christie. And because Max Christie's played really well, and obviously the assists are up, but everybody's freaking out. Max Christie's playing so well. It's like, well, he's shooting 47% from 3. So he's going to start averaging 14 points rather than 18 points sooner than later. But yeah, I think if you just want a short-term boost, it's hard to turn down. Like, again, in a 16-team league, when guys are hot, you got to just pick them up.
Yeah, I think a big part of the reason for the field goal percentage jump for Keldon Johnson is almost all these are coming at the rim. A lot of dunks, a lot of layups. He didn't just magically just start to become Kevin Durant from the mid range, and we'll see how sustainable that is. I mean, those games came against New Orleans, Detroit, and that dead Phoenix Suns team that we were talking about coming out of the break. We'll get to some questions in the chat momentarily. We'll talk about some players we're looking to perhaps acquire prior to the fantasy trade deadline. But first, we got a message from our presenting sponsors over at Edge Boost and Pool Genius. Have you ever had your debit card declined or had to call your bank at 3 a.m. in Vegas? Well, Edge Boost is the first consumer-facing online bank dedicated to the gaming industry. There are a number of benefits to using Edge Boost: $250K per day in debit deposits, unlimited withdrawals, cash back on sports betting, DFS, sweeps, deposit $25, you get $25, 100% approval for all gaming activity, financial segmentation for discretion and responsible gaming. It's compatible today for prediction markets, iCasino, DFS, sports betting, lottery, brick and mortar casinos, horse racing, and sweeps, and no transaction reviews or account freezes. Visit edgeboost.bet today and use our promo code ROTOPOD. That's promo code ROTOPOD, ROTOPOD, at edgeboost.bet. We're also brought to you by Pool Genius. You want to win more in your golf, March Madness, and football pools? Pool Genius gives you data-driven picks and strategies to outsmart the competition. With over a decade of analytics and historical data, Pool Genius is the only site dedicated exclusively to helping people win sports pools. With Pool Genius, users win 3 times more often than expected. RotoWire listeners get exclusive offers over at Pool Genius. Go to poolgenius.com/RotoWire for up to 55% off, or you can start a 4-day free trial. That's poolgenius.com/RotoWire. All right, Alex, like I mentioned, big fall in the stake league over the last week. Starting to think about what I may need to do down the stretch. I think if guys just stay healthy, we're going to be all right. We'll finish in that top half, but fantasy trade deadline coming up in a lot of leagues, end of February, as the case for a lot of mine. Any players, any teams who you found yourself targeting, like I don't tend to be overly aggressive in the trade market. I will let trade offers come to me. I will oftentimes accept those trade offers, but I'm usually, working the fringes in the waiver wire more than I am trying to shake up my own roster. But are you starting to look around at maybe some of the bottom feeders or even some of the best teams in your league, guys who might have categories, kind of sealed up right now where you think, okay, maybe we can help each other?
Yeah, I think now's definitely the time to do that because there are actually situations where, depending on what format of league you're in, where it can be a win-win trade for both fantasy managers. But in terms of specific players or specific teams, I think you have to start going after, either the bottom feeding teams that are just going to have young guys seeing a ton of usage. Now the problem is most of those guys are scooped up off the waiver wire
Right.
or whatever. But like Josh Giddey is a name, for Chicago. I don't think they're going to like shut Josh Giddey down. They have to make a decision on whether or not they want to like give him an extension, right?
Yeah.
Um, so that's something. And then teams, especially in the Western Conference, like we just talked about, that are fighting to stay in. If you can, I don't know what fantasy manager would be willing to do this. I guess it depends on your league, but like a Devin Booker, Kyrie Irving, Jimmy Butler, like these are the types of guys that are going to have to play huge minutes down the stretch for teams that are trying to make the playoffs.
Would you think about trying to buy Kawhi Leonard right now? And I asked
Oh.
this at this specific time because the Clippers are on the second night of a back-to-back. Kawhi did not play yesterday. He is now not playing today. Like if you're sitting in, I don't know, fourth place, you're like, I got to make something happen. Would you take that chance on Kawhi?
That's interesting because the way the West comes out, I don't think there's really any way they fall out. Yeah, they're only 3 games up on 10, right? So
Right.
they can't really pull their foot off the gas. But yeah, like if let's say the fantasy manager who has Kawhi's top 2 or something and they don't really need him,
Right.
and you're in the middle of the pack and you need to just make a move, I would explore that.
Yeah, I think a team like Sacramento is interesting as well. I mean, it's such a diverse offense, in terms of stat production. You got like 4 pretty high level guys, even Keegan Murray, obviously somebody who's important in deeper leagues, especially like, could you pry away a DeMar DeRozan? Could you pry away someone like Zach LaVine? These guys, they're not going to be the best player on anybody's fantasy team, right? Like we're not going to sit here and tell you, yes, go trade for SGA if you could try to pull that off. But I think you almost want to time the market on some of these where remember like probably about a month ago, we were getting all these questions of like, man, do I have to drop DeMar DeRozan? Should I part ways with him? Like some of these like established, clear top 75 guys, there might be somebody in your league who's in the same situation as you. They feel some sense of urgency. Try to prey on those managers when somebody has a rough week. I don't know. You could look at also guys coming back from injury. Like a Rudy Gobert, for instance. He's still out tonight. We don't know how much time he's going to miss, but that could be a dice roll if you need blocks, if you need rebounds. Fred VanVleet should be back soon for the Rockets. By the way, Jabari Smith back in action. We should note he's played 2 games in a row now for Houston, and I assume a big part of the reason that you parted ways with Whitmore.
Yeah, that was the rotation's going to get jammed up, especially when VanVleet's back. But another, you mentioned DeRozan, LaMelo Ball.
Yes.
Like there might be a fantasy manager out there who's like, I can't deal with this LaMelo Ball thing anymore. I want to move off. I need a high floor player because I'm top 3 in my league and I want to stay there and I can't take any chances. So that's an option as well. I will do a RotoWire plug right now. There is, if you go to the RotoWire fantasy basketball page, you go to the stats tab and go to fantasy point changes. We have a page that tells you how many fantasy points players averages have changed over the past. You can do 1 game, 2 game, 3 game, 5 games. That's how I picked out the name LaMelo. Guys like KD is not on a good streak. Curry's been down. Like this is a good way to find buy low candidates. For sure.
What about in Portland? We talk about Chicago trying to having to pick a lane, and I think Portland's in somewhat of a similar situation. Will be much more of an uphill battle for the Blazers to work their way into the play-in mix. But like Chicago, they have no chance to get into the bottom 4. And I guess I don't see a ton of merit in trying to maneuver yourself to get like the 8th pick versus the 10th pick. So I do think Portland's going to try to kind of play this thing straight and gun for it as much as they can. We have seen Shaedon Sharpe have some big late season stretches here. And maybe that requires an injury or requires some sort of shutdown. But, one of those guys who continues to produce on a per minute basis. You're still getting the points. You're still getting the threes. The minutes have not necessarily been there every single night. Would you think about maybe throwing out an offer for him?
Sure, yeah. If you need the points and the threes, I don't really trust him as a fantasy player besides points and threes, but that works for points leagues and it works in category leagues if you need those categories. And actually, I think he could have a really big game tonight going up against Utah, which
Yeah.
they bleed 3-pointers and especially to off guards. But that's we're getting into the weeds there. But this is a really funny team. Like if you look at their graph of like, guys who have performed like the best fantasy point performers, it's like a game of Minesweeper. It's like
Oh,
there's no, it's not like, red at the top with the same four guys. It's just, Jabari Walker has 46 fantasy points. And then Rob Williams comes in and has a great game. And Shaedon Sharpe is great, but then he's terrible. And then, Avdia is amazing. It's just like, it's just anybody on any given night can pop off.
Toumani Camara, of all people.
Of course.
I did see, by the way, they're calling Toumani Camara Hive the Tomaniacs, which
I like. Sure.
Like. I don't know if he's necessarily like needs his own nickname for his fans quite yet, but why not?
I've seen the security Camara as like a nickname, like security camera.
Sure.
There people are there. We're trying to make it happen.
All right, we got some good questions stacking up in the chat, so we will head over there. Giovanni says Jose Alvarado or Tyus Jones, 9-cat, 10-team league.
I think this has to be Jose Alvarado. Actually, Jones is just the Budenholzer seems to be losing trust in Tyus Jones, and the Pelicans are going nowhere fast, and there is a level of trust with Alvarado, and he's going to have his poor scoring nights for sure, but I think he's a more trustworthy source of assists and steals than Tyus Jones at this point.
I hope nobody goes back and watches my video from like August on why you need to draft Tyus Jones after pick 100, but this is a no-brainer. It's got to be Alvarado for me. DeJounte Murray's not coming back. Christian Rogers asked, who is a better long-term hold for the fantasy playoffs? Nick Richards, Goga Bitadze, or Yves Missi? I have to drop one in order to make room for Fred VanVleet. VanVleet, by the way, did practice today. We'll see if he's back on Tuesday night. It is a 3-game week for Houston.
I don't know if any of these, none of these guys are inspiring. I think Missi in theory has the highest upside, but are they going to play it safe with his knee? He's played. He didn't miss any time with the knee thing. I think I would go Missi, actually.
Yeah, I don't love either of these options, to be honest. Richards is not really giving you blocks, so I think it partially depends how much you care about that. There might be like the highest floor for him the rest of the way, and that's not really saying a whole lot because his floor has not even been all that high. But I think I'm with you on, potential shutdowns for the Pelicans. I was a little suspicious that Missi came back that quickly from a hyperextension. Maybe it was just kind of, misnomered from the beginning, but that's something certainly to monitor. And Bitadze, like the minutes have not really been there, but he continues to pile up blocks. And even the other night against Washington, 11 and 9, didn't have a block in that game, but gave you 2 steals. Prior to that, he had 4 straight games with multiple blocks. I wish we could give you like a really strong endorsement here, but if you're shooting for pure upside, I think you are right that Missi is the play there, Alex. Got a Devin Vassell question from Jay Sizzle. He says, is Vassell a drop in a 9-cat 10-team head-to-head league? My choices to replace him would be Podziemski, Dante DiVincenzo, or Scoot Henderson.
I don't think I can drop Vassell. I would actually consider Vassell a buy low. We just talked about how Keldon Johnson's shooting 77% from the field.
Yeah.
Over the past 5 games, Devin Vassell is shooting 27% from the field, which is he's just going to be better than that. Now, he's having a little bit of a disappointing stretch here, but without Wembanyama, like the usage, a ton of usage opens up. They need somebody to step up, and some nights, maybe that is Keldon Johnson. But I think realistically, they're gonna have to go to Vassell a lot. So, and I get why you're, entertaining dropping him for Podziemski or DiVincenzo or Scoot Henderson, and maybe that ends up coming out in the wash at the end of the year. But I think I would hang on to Vassell.
This has been a brutal 5-game stretch. No question about it. He is 14 of 51 from the field. The minutes have been down the last couple of games. Those were also blowouts. They were on the wrong end of both of those blowouts, so I wouldn't read too much into that. I will say, though, I had his points over against Phoenix. What was that, like last Thursday, I think. He did not get there. And watching that game, like he's not as involved as I would have thought. Like we saw a lot of Keldon Johnson. Like De'Aaron Fox handled like almost every clutch possession in the fourth quarter. So I think, your first instinct without Wembanyama is, okay, well, Vassell's got to do more. And the numbers would bear that out. The on-off numbers say Vassell averages like 5 more points per 36. So I would still lean on that in the long term. But I think De'Aaron Fox joining this team, having such a small sample there, you kind of don't realize how much maybe that takes away from Vassell. Chris Paul, of course, still on the ball. I still wouldn't drop him. Those like Podziemski's obviously been better. DiVincenzo, we'll see. He's supposed to come back soon. He's been pretty shaky. There might be, a kind of a wind up period for him after missing so much time. So I would try to wait this out. And like you said, Alex, I think maybe this pertains more to our previous discussion of like somebody you could trade for at an affordable price right now would be Vassell.
I understand wanting to pick any of these guys up. Like I think if you do drop Vassell and pick any of these guys up, I don't think that's the reason you win or lose your league. So, I wouldn't overthink this one. If you want to do it, it's not the worst thing in the world. Maybe explore trading Vassell first, like a 2-for-1. Like you send 2 guys out, get 1 guy back, and then you could pick up Pods, DiVincenzo, or Scoot. So maybe explore that first, because I'm sure there is somebody in your league who does think, sort of highly of Vassell still.
Would you drop Matas Buzelis to add either of the following 2 Pelicans, Kelly Olynyk or Carlo Matkovic? 14 team 9 cap.
Did you see that quote from Willie Green about Olynyk?
No. Did he try to wear a backwards hat in a game?
Quote, "We really want to put the ball in his hands and unlock him."
Oh God.
He said of Kelly Olynyk.
Well,
so
they unlocked him yesterday.
14 points, 15 rebounds, 2 assists, 5 turnovers. Look, as anybody who's listened to this podcast knows, over the past half decade, if we say if Kelly Olynyk is unleashed, if he's unlocked, you gotta roster him. Would I drop Buzelis for either of these guys? Buzelis, as much as I like him, he's not a very multi-dimensional player right now. He's kind of just points. His rebounds fluctuate. Yeah, he'll give you some blocks. So I think I might. I mean, I think I would drop Buzelis for Olynyk, honestly. And maybe they end up sitting Olynyk towards the end of the year, and it's annoying, but then Matkovic would get more runs. So, yeah, I think I would do that, actually.
Is De'Aaron Fox going to get surgery in the offseason or during the current season? Hard to say. I know the reports a couple weeks ago indicated that offseason is much more likely. I guess if the Spurs were to lose like 10 of their next 11 games, maybe you just make that decision a little bit earlier. But I think as long as they're competitive, he'll try to push that. But we don't have any inside info there. Daddy Zelling says, what to do with Embiid? And I laugh because I literally just got an alert on my phone. I don't know why I'm getting like push notifications from NBA Centel. It says Joel Embiid has announced his retirement from the NBA. That is not true. He is not retired. But what to do with Embiid? I mean, has anything really changed? We answer this question, once a month. Still a good question, still prescient, but I don't know, man. This is why we kind of caution people to stay away. Not trying to victory lap that. There's been plenty of things we would not victory lap on, but this is kind of what you signed up for. I think, of course, by now you hope that there would at least be a little bit more of a routine that you could lean back on, but we know he's not going to play back-to-backs. I'd be shocked if he plays tonight. I don't know if he's actually been officially ruled out yet. I think it's more likely than not that he gets shut down, Alex, but like in terms of what you can do, you can't really trade him. I think you just wait for that news to come and then you drop him when it does. I don't know, man.
I would do everything I could to trade him.
Yeah.
Who you would even take back?
Anybody.
You think anybody that's a consistent starting fantasy player?
Yes.
Okay.
It's not like Embiid has not even been that good when he's out there. Like last 2 games since the All-Star break, he played against Boston, he played against Brooklyn. He played about 30 minutes per game and gave you 14.5 points, 5 rebounds, 4.5 assists. And yeah, maybe we're cherry picking 2 bad games. His last 2 games that he appeared in before the All-Star break were better, but he's not giving you like peak Joel Embiid production. It depends on your read of the situation. I'm reading it more negatively. I think the fact that they're even putting it out publicly, that he's seeing specialists, that he's not right, like that's a PR effort, right? To kind of make excuses, valid excuses perhaps, for why the season has gone the way that it has. I mean, I'm not saying you trade him for Tyus Jones necessarily, but if you can just get any viable starter, because again, the rest of the way, even in a best case scenario, if you're in a weekly league, like how often are you confidently locking Joel Embiid into your lineup? This is a team that they have at least one back-to-back every week in March.
Would you trade him for Coulibaly? That's the first name that I was like,
Why would you ask
I
him
don't
that?
know if I would do that.
I don't know,
But
man. I wouldn't. I mean, it's not like obviously you're taking a huge hit in any trade. It's not like I would be throwing a parade for that. But anybody who I feel like I would start, yes, I think you have to. Like you're just not getting anything out of him. Like in a best case scenario, maybe you're getting 2 games out of Embiid, and you hope that he gives you like 28 and 12 in one of those.
yeah. Okay, so I think I talked about this with Kieran on the Friday pod because we're always talking about try to trade Embiid. But there obviously has to be somebody in your league who is trading for Embiid.
Right.
What is the scenario in which you as a fantasy manager would trade for Embiid? And I talked about with Kieran, and I said, if I'm like 4th to last,
Yeah.
and I'm just out of options now. I mean, I have to, there's no other option for me other than to just get as many high upside, low floor players as possible that people are trying to dump and then stream in every single other position and just go for it.
Yeah, I always think of things in like the stake league context where it's like you just got to get in the top half of the league. And yeah, if I was, which I basically am right now, I think I'm in like 11th, but I'm like 4 points away from being 6th. Like that's too much of a risk for me, I guess. But if somebody offered me Embiid for Terry Rozier, for example, who I'm probably going to drop this coming week, I think I would do it. Right? It's like as long as I'm not trading away anybody of consequence. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe you start a little bit higher. Try to get somebody who's like borderline top 100. See if anybody takes the bait and. If not, again, I think there's a good chance 2 weeks from now you might be dropping him when we get the news that they're shutting him down. So we'll see. I hope I'm just being too negative about this, but I think the Sixers are finally starting to see the writing on the wall. The Intrepid Cephalopod says, hey guys, this may be a conspiracy theory, but there seems to be a Mitch Rob sighting. There does. Any thoughts on expectations? Is there a chance we see Cat at the 4 with Mitch Rob at the 5? Is this worth a dice roll? For one, I think we definitely see that, right? I mean, obviously you could point to the last 2 seasons in Minnesota. Cat is a 5, but is capable of playing the 4. I think when you look at, some of the defensive issues that the Knicks have had, especially against elite teams, they definitely need Mitchell Robinson out there. Kind of a different question though, if you're like, are you taking a chance on him in fantasy? Are you locking him into a starting lineup?
I think he has top 100 upside if things go right. Like last year, he averaged 28 fantasy points a game, which is borderline for people in like 10-team leagues. Sorry, that was 2 years ago. Last year, he averaged 23 fantasy points per game. But yeah, I mean, I think he will see time at the 5 next to Cat. Will he start? I don't think so, but this New York team is so thin that I think if they can just get 24 to 26 minutes out of Mitchell Robinson, like that's a big boost, and I think it'll happen. But I wouldn't trade any, or I wouldn't drop any, top 75 player, or maybe even I don't even think I would drop a top 100 player to get Mitchell Robinson off waivers.
So this is not a perfect science, but I'm pulling his game logs from last year, and I'm trying to take the median in terms of minutes played. So he had a handful of games where he played 30 plus. He had a handful of games where he played like 10 to 18 minutes. I'm just grabbing a 15 game sample right in the middle. So he averaged 26 minutes per game in the span, 6.3 points, 9.5 rebounds, 1.1 blocks, 1.4 steals.
Yeah, I mean,
Good
the
enough.
thing is, yeah, I mean, he's your very classic center. So in a category league, like you are rostering him for 3 things: field goal percentage, rebounds, and blocks. Right. So his entire fantasy value is tied up in those 3 stats.
Yeah.
Last year he shot 57% from the field. 2 years ago he shot 67% from the field. 3 years ago he shot 76% from the field. And there's been fluctuating blocks and rebounds numbers during that time. So you're really hypersensitive to those stats.
All right. Galahad 007 says, I'm currently in the final playoff spot in my league. And if I'm looking to trade LaMelo Ball, what kind of value should I look for in return? Good question. Always difficult to answer these. Like, who should I trade this guy for? But this is a good one with LaMelo. In terms of per game production over the last 30 days, LaMelo ranks well outside the top 150. A couple partial games played in there are really dragging that down. So I guess you kind of almost have to go full season with LaMelo. In that case, he's been the 22nd best fantasy player in 8cat.
So I think if you want to get back someone who, obviously there's a risk. Whoever's trading for LaMelo is going to say, hey, I'm taking on a risk here. So I think you just want to. Some of this depends on your like the stats you want, right? So I'm not gonna be able to give you a perfect comp, but like if someone wants to give you, oh man, oh let me throw a couple names at you, Nick.
Okay.
If someone said I'll give you, you have LaMelo. Someone said I'll give you Josh Giddey for him. Would you do that?
I don't know that I would. It depends on your level of belief that LaMelo could get shut down. I think that's a good name though. I think that's a good name. The one I was thinking of is if somebody offered me Dyson Daniels, I think I would do that.
Dyson Daniels certainly an option. Maybe even like Jamal Murray.
Yeah.
You know,
No
someone who
concerns
is
there.
yeah. Jamal Murray's like just hanging out around rank 45 every year, just
Yep.
like the same guy, right? Siakam might feel like you're selling kind of low on LaMelo, but just Siakam's one of the most steady players in the NBA, right?
Yep.
Doesn't get hurt. So I think those are the types of players, the guys who hover around ranks like 40 to 60.
Mhm. All right. Felix says, "Hey, how you guys doing? We're doing well. Appreciate the question. I wanted to ask about action items if you've clinched the number one seed." All right. So he's already got the number one seed locked up. What are you doing essentially to prepare for the postseason?
I would just try to look at the playoff schedule. Depending on if you're playing a default league or not. But look at the playoff schedule and then see if there's any back end roster moves that you can make to take advantage of the playoff schedule. Some teams playing more than others during the fantasy basketball playoffs, I should say. And maybe there's a couple spots on your bench, one or two spots that you can. Now, if you're in first, your bench is probably pretty good, but there might be a spot or two on your bench that you can essentially flex, like grab some players now
Mhm.
who project to be more useful fantasy playoff players.
All right. Here's a good one from Ob Thompson. Would you drop Tari Eason or Bilal Coulibaly for Scoot Henderson in a 9-cat?
Eason, probably just because I'm not totally confident he's going to play back to backs. They're also Jabari Smith back and
Yep.
Fred VanVleet. That rotation is going to tighten up. And if Eason can't get 26 to 28 minutes, it's just not worth rostering. So to me, this question is more like, would you drop Coulibaly for Scoot? And Coulibaly's on one of his bad offensive stretches right now. But generally speaking, like if you take his past 15 games as a whole, he's given you 13 points, 5 boards, 4 assists, steal and a half a block, 28 fantasy points. I think I would be okay dropping him for Scoot because but it's confusing, right? I mean, we're like, what is Washington going to do with Chris Middleton and Marcus Smart? Like,
Yeah.
what is are they going to play 22 minutes a game and just suck up a bunch of usage, right? And then Coulibaly's going to be off ball all the time. So, I think if you do drop Coulibaly for Scoot, I can't really blame you for that.
Yeah, I actually think they're pretty comparable fantasy players, despite being very different real life players. Like Coulibaly's assist numbers aren't that far behind Scoot. They're similar in terms of steals, field goal percentage also been similar of late. So I wouldn't stress too much about this one. Maybe do some some game counting over the next couple of weeks. Speaking of Scoot in Portland's first 3 games this week are all against tanking teams. That is correct. If Rob Williams is out and he's already been ruled out tonight, would you pick up Jabari Walker, who's coming off of the 20-14 game with 2 steals against the Charlotte Hornets on Saturday when the Blazers set the franchise record for largest margin of victory?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead and pick up Jabari Walker. He is last year we saw him put up some big numbers. Last year when he what was this? When he played at least 30. I can't believe how many times Jabari Walker played 30 minutes last season. 18 times Jabari Walker played 30 minutes.
Damn.
Averaged 11 and 11 with about a 3 per game. So he's a big time hustle guy. Like he'll shoot threes and he'll grab offensive rebounds. Like he's just out there flying around. So yeah, sure. I pick him up. He had a great game the other night. 20 and 14.
The entire pod has been building toward this question, Alex. Should we pick up Shaedon Sharpe right now?
Always. I've been trying to tell people. I mean, if you don't need like if you don't need the stats he's not giving you, which I know is a funny way to phrase it, but like
Which is a
he
lot of things.
is like if you don't need the threes, right? If you don't need threes, if you don't need assists, like if you just need his big man stats, he is absolutely worth picking up. Which sounds ridiculous to say, but again, I'll take this 15 game sample, which isn't even like too much of cherry picking. It's 9 points on 60%, 6 rebounds. He even gives you 2 assists with about 2 stocks. It's just the per minute stuff is crazy. And so if he ever ends up seeing 28 minutes per game for this stretch, that's huge. I don't have a ton of confidence, but you can go ahead and pick him up.
The number 1 defense in the NBA over the last 10 games.
Yeah.
The Brooklyn Nets, baby. 106 defensive rating. Nets and the Lakers, 1 and 2 in defense. All right, we'll hit a few more and then we'll be out of here. Is Donovan Clingan worth holding? His minutes seem pretty capped, which I think limits his upside. Would you drop Quentin Grimes or Zachary Shea to pick up Clingan in a 10-team 9-cat?
I don't think I would drop Grimes. We just had this big discussion about Embiid. How much is he going to play? Paul George can't stay healthy. Grimes has looked really good for Philadelphia. Now his shooting percentage might come down a little bit, but I think what he's doing is pretty legit. He's also playing a ton of minutes already. Shea is just really one-dimensional. I know he's played better-ish lately, but anytime he gets more than like 4 stats in any other category than points, it's a total fluke. So I think I would be very comfortable dropping Shea for Clingan, because even if Clingan sees 20 to 25 minutes only regularly, he's still a threat for 10 rebounds and 2 boards, or 10 rebounds and 2 blocks, which is certainly someone worth rostering in a lot of leagues.
All right. So Charles Bassey talk. Is he a drop in shallow leagues? Do we like Shea as a pickup in a 10-team 9-cat? So we just talked about Shea, but your thoughts on Chuck Bassey?
This is tough, man, because he
did get
tweaked
hurt
his
yesterday.
knee. Yeah, he tweaked his knee again, and I don't know what his chances are of coming back and playing big minutes. Like, he might come back soon, but then he'll probably be limited, and then back to back, sit out. So, I think that's completely speculative. Like, I think this is a pickup for someone who is already like in first place, and it's just like, oh, pick up Bassey. Maybe I'll go crazy. I don't know.
Yeah. What a nice spot that would be. If Bassey is hurt, could Bismack Biyombo be an ad in a 14-team league? 10-10 with 4 blocks and 2 steals the other day.
Could he be? Sure.
I mean,
it is possible. Last year he averaged he's just not very good per minute. And it's really just all about the rebounds and the blocks.
Yeah.
So 14 team, maybe. You're probably better off streaming that spot. I'll put it that way. I don't think Bismack is so much of an ad that it's going to be like he's going to take up a spot on your bench compared to just streaming that spot.
All right, we got a few more good ones here. A couple quick trade questions. Would you trade Zion for Donovan Mitchell? And the other one is, would you trade LaMelo for KD? So we'll start with Zion and Donovan Mitchell.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't just Zion. He's not even playing a full complement of minutes. They're going to shut him down.
Yeah,
he just has more weaknesses across the board than Donovan Mitchell, who's better all around fantasy player.
Yep. LaMelo for KD. I think I'd do this.
Yes, I would do this. Because of partially what we were talking about earlier, like players on these Western Conference teams who are trying to make the playoffs, like they can't sit KD. They got to play KD like 40 minutes to make sure they win these games. So, and the opposite might be true for LaMelo. So yeah, I would trade LaMelo for KD.
Suns also don't own their pick, right? I don't know when they own their next pick. So there's no tanking incentive here for Phoenix either. All right, we'll do 2 more. Aaron Nesmith, Kelly Olynyk, and Davion Mitchell. Any thoughts on these 3 rest of season? So probably more of a pickup question.
We talked about Olynyk earlier. I completely fine as a pickup. If Willie Green is going to do point Kelly, then you just have to roster him. Yeah. Nesmith, just not having that great of a year, not as involved offensively as he was last year. I don't really think you have to pick him up. And for Davion Mitchell, like he'll have his occasional 8 assist, 2 steal game, and you're like, whoa, what's this? But he's just really uninvolved. And it was that way in Toronto too. Like when he was rosterable in Toronto, it was by a thread. and buy a thread for people who needed those stats. So
Yeah.
he's got to play a lot of minutes because he's like a defensive specialist. But Olynyk is like the clear ad between these three guys.
Yeah. And, Davion Mitchell, great defender in real life. Like he doesn't have a super high steal rate. One of those guys who I think is just a little bit more effective than he is a fantasy asset. I got to sneak this one in real quick. Is Terry Rozier a drop? I think he might be. Man.
I'll let you answer this. You're the Rozier whisperer.
This is the sole reason why I've not had as much success as I thought I would this year. Terry Rozier played 10 minutes the other night, yesterday, competitive game against Milwaukee Bucks, did absolutely nothing, played 16 minutes in another competitive game prior to that. The Heat have had injuries. There's been every opportunity for Terry Rozier to seize on that, and he has not done it. So I think it's time. We'll end this one on a higher note, though. There was a good question here from Galahad. Who's been your fantasy draft steal of the season? So I guess just who have been your biggest hits, Alex?
Oh, that's a good question. I gotta pull up my.
I will tell you, I have my list. I don't have him in stake, but I have Dyson Daniels in a handful of leagues. That's been very nice. Never anticipated him being a borderline top 20 guy, being like the greatest source of steals in modern fantasy history. Trey Murphy in a couple of leagues. He's really come on of late. Actually in the stake league, took a chance on Zach LaVine and didn't get quite the discount that I felt like I should have. It was an auction. It's, super competitive. People at that point were trying to kind of load up a little bit. So I think I paid like $14, $15 for him. But I mean, this is somebody who was easily a $25+ player in years past. And fingers crossed I can get another healthy month out of Zach LaVine. That's been one of the better hits. What about you?
So not as much. So in the stake league, it was just a lot of like very solid picks, and I've been falling in the standings partially because of like Vucevic, and among injuries. But in our keeper league, which is a very deep league, I paid up for RJ Barrett, which actually ended up being like he's having a pretty good year.
Yeah,
I also got Stephon Castle in the keeper league for $1. Has been plenty useful for me this year and should be beyond. And I also grabbed Khalil Ware in the reserve draft.
Yeah.
So I think I actually am having most of my like draft steals have actually been relative to keeper leagues rather than redraft.
Yeah, I would throw Zubac out there as well.
Zubac.
Unfortunately, got him in more of my lesser leagues, but obviously that's been super profitable. Other than that, I mean, I don't have much Josh Hart. I know Chris in the chat said, his big three have been Daniels, Hart, and Amen. Did not get nearly enough Amen Thompson. I think I only have one share of him. And Hart that was such an obvious one. Like he was so available, and for whatever reason, I don't. Same with Anunoby too. I was just like, well, Bridges is going to come in, and Towns and Brunson is too many mouths to feed, and once again underestimated the sheer minutes that those guys would be playing. But I'm less surprised about Hart than I am Anunoby. I thought he would take a little bit more of a backseat.
Yeah, this just goes to show a lot of these guys were available after pick 100 or the late 90s, but this just goes to show you like once picks 80 to 90 come around, you start taking shots like on anybody that you like, because all you got to do is hit on one of these guys,
right?
And it changes your entire fantasy outlook. And the other 4 roster spots that you have to fill, you only need 2 reliable bench guys. You can stream in 2 guys all year and it's fine. So I think more and more, you can start like in fantasy these days, once pick 80 comes around, just start throwing darts.
Start firing away. All right, man. We'll cap it here. Great questions as always in the chat. Appreciate everybody chiming in. As always, if you're listening to this as a podcast, you can find us on the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball YouTube channel. Still doing 4 episodes per week through the end of the regular season. So I'll be back with Brandon Kravitz at some point this week. That one's starting to float around a bit with our other media obligations, but I believe that will be Wednesday. We'll also have Mike Barner and Kieran Sprecher giving you their usual episode. Alex, Ken, and Shannon back on Friday talking waiver wire. We're also back on SiriusXM NBA this week. So Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday this week, you can catch Alex and I 7 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern over on SiriusXM NBA, giving you betting advice, giving you game previews for each of the big nights this week. And Alex will be joining us on VSiN tomorrow on Prop Points. That'll be around 2:30 p.m. Eastern. So looking forward to that, man, and we'll talk soon.